Hi BOD, welcome to my kitchen. It's a rainy, cold day in Wisconsin, which is the perfect day for staying inside and doing some canning. I'm going to give you a little demonstration. I'm going to can something really simple like applesauce, and I'll show you all the tools you need. And then we can go back online and have a discussion about canning in a dystopian type environment. Thanks for coming. So the first thing I will show you is the different size jars. I have the quart size, the pint size, and the half pint size. There also is a quarter pint size, but I don't mess around with that. There's two different size tops. There's the wide mouth, which is this one, and then there's the narrow mouth, which is just a smaller opening. But I don't mess around with the narrow mouth at all. I only use wide mouth just because it's easier. The other thing you'll need is lids. And I also like to have a canning funnel, which fits perfectly into the mouth of the jar. I don't even know what this is called, but you pick up the hot jars with it. And this is basically a magnet on a stick. And I'll show you how I'll use all those in just a minute. So the other thing that you'll need is a good sized pot. This is mine. You can see how big it is. And in the case of hot packing, which is the kind of canning that I do, you'll need a canning pot. And I'll show you how to use those too. So I didn't make you watch while I cut up, peeled, sliced my apples. This is 6 apples. You see what size pot that is. Normally in the fall I will process 50 to 100 pounds of apples, which I've never actually counted how many that is because I would probably never do it again if I did. But I thought this would be a good chance while my apples are cooking to show you some things that I have canned, some things I've done in the past. This one is blueberry jam. You can do it pretty much any kind of fruit jam. Raspberry, strawberry, blueberry. Another good one is relish. I particularly like relish and pickles because of the vinegar. It makes them last a lot longer. This one was actually just made in 2016, but I've eaten ones that have been processed about 3 years old, and they were perfectly fine. Tomatoes, obviously, is another very popular thing to can. This is just pure tomatoes. This one is spaghetti sauce, and I also love canning salsa. Homemade salsa is the best. I call it vitamins in a jar. Another good one is apples. You can do pretty much anything with apples. Applesauce. This recipe is actually canned apple pie filling. My favorite, however, is apple butter, which we do every fall. And I don't have any left. I'm so sad I'm out of apple butter. So that's some things that you can can. There's tons of other things that you can can. My great-grandma used to can everything from green beans, peas, beets, squash, pretty much any kind of vegetable you can grow in Wisconsin. I also wanted to show you a couple of books that are my go-to source for canning. The most famous one is the Blue Book. As you can see, mine is well used and has lots of notes in it. This is the basics from what you need, how much you need. I highly recommend if you are considering canning just to put this in your library. Another good one that I recently found is called Put 'em Up. It's got some great recipes. You can see how thick it is. A lot of different suggestions. It's just a fun addition if you want to add a book to your library. First, I wanted to tell you that you can can meat. I personally have canned venison, deer meat, and beef. It is a slightly different process. You have to be more cautious about killing the bacteria, obviously. but it is possible, and also it doesn't last quite as long as fruits and vegetables. The average fruit and vegetable lasts about 3 years, sometimes longer if there's vinegar in it. Meat, however, you generally only consume for about a year. After that, it gets a little sketchy. I wanted to tell you some tips on how to tell if a can jar is spoiled. The biggest thing you'll look for, obviously, is visible mold. It's not yellow or green. Usually it's gray or black. So if you were to open a can of applesauce and it's gray on the top, throw it away. The other thing you would look for is the smell. It should smell whatever fruit or vegetable you canned. If it smells really strong, or a vinegar smell and there is no vinegar in it, or it smells bad, throw it out. The other thing that you'll see is it will look funny. For example, sometimes when tomatoes spoil, they'll be brown or black. If it doesn't look like the vegetable or fruit or meat that you canned, throw it away. I also wanted to talk about the stigma around canning, of the risk of salmonella or getting sick from eating them. And I wanted to reassure you that I have eaten canned food my entire life and have canned myself for about 15 years, and I have never once gotten sick from anything that I've eaten. Generally, it is pretty obvious when something spoils, so there is a very minimal risk as long as you follow the steps correctly. So I just wanted to give you some of those tips, and we'll get to canning. All right, my apples are cooked up and ready. Before I get started, I wanted to tell you the difference between hot pack and cold pack canning. The most common one these days is actually cold pack. You just put the hot food or even the cold food into a jar, put the lid on, and process it in a pressure cooker. I, however, learned old school, which is hot packing. The basic premises of which is you put hot food into a hot jar, put a hot lid on top, screw it down, and then boil it for a set time, generally 20 to 30 minutes. So I'm going to grab a lid here, a jar rather. What I do to heat my jars up is sometimes I'll get them right out of the dishwasher, or I will put really hot water in my kitchen sink, which is what I did with this one, which makes the jar hot. Let's get boiling here. I forgot to mention a ladle is very helpful. So this is where the funnel comes in handy. Make sure you can see what I'm doing. So you take whatever fruit or vegetable that you cook down, put it into your jar. See why the funnel comes in handy. Obviously it's not a necessity, but it's nice. I fill it up to about the top line. You want to leave room for air because it expands as it cools. Take a towel or a rag, wipe off the rim to make sure that it's dry and there's no food in the way. And this is where my magnet and a stick comes in handy. Obviously, again, not a necessary thing. I actually stole this from my husband, but you can get them in a hardware store. So, my lid was in boiling water, but it's still cool enough that I can touch it. Put it on your jar. Take the collar, I shall call it. Screw it on tight. That easy. And then you would put it into this handy little basket that comes with your canning pot. And I'm not going to do it today, but you would fill it up. You can put up one in the middle too, is what I usually do. And then you would place it down into the water. I can show you. I didn't put water in it, but you would place it down into the water. Some recipes say to put the jar covered in water. Most say to put the water only up to the edge. I've done it both ways and it actually works both ways. So then you would process those, which means boiling them, for about 20 to 30 minutes. And when that's done, you would lift it up and set your jars aside to cool. This handy tool, which I still don't know the name of, the purpose of it is to lift your jars up out of the boiling water so you don't have to touch them. Fancy, I know. It's this. So then you would set your hot jar someplace, room temperature, and let it cool. And this one probably won't do it because I'm not going to boil it. Instead, we are just going to eat cooked apples for supper. But you would hear the lid pop. Not always. Sometimes you don't. But what that means is that it formed a seal. So that's a good noise to hear. So there, you can kind of see it. There's a little blip or a little bump in the middle. If it's sticking up, that means your lid didn't seal. So that means that that's something you'll have to eat right away or keep cold or redo. So yeah, that is how easy hot canning is. Like I said, cold packing is even more popular because you don't have to have a hot lid or a hot jar. One thing I wanted to mention when I talk about these lids is obviously in a dystopian type situation, you won't have a Walmart to go get lids. I personally stock up on them. They don't really go bad. I've used them as much as a year and a half later and they still were fine. But I will talk about other methods that you could use in a dystopian type situation. So that is my quick and easy demonstration of canning, and I will see you on Facebook. I thought of one more thing I wanted to talk to you about before I let you go. This is why I didn't record live, because this is how my brain works. But I wanted to tell you that each fruit, vegetable, and meat is a slightly different process. What I showed you here with applesauce is fairly simple. But the time factor, as far as canning goes, is all in the processing of the fruit, vegetable, or meat. For example, if you were going to cut up a deer, that could take you all day. The biggest time factor as far as what I make would be salsa, which tomatoes are an entire process in themselves. You have to clean them off, clean the dirt off, boil them until the skin cracks, take the skin off, and then in my case, I puree the tomatoes. You don't have to. Then you have to cut up all of the vegetables, chop them. Then you have to add all the other ingredients, such as vinegar and the spices. And that's when that big pot I showed you at the beginning, that comes in handy, because then you put all of those ingredients together and heat that up. So I wanted to tell you that canning in itself is actually not very time consuming, but processing the fruits, vegetables, and meat is what takes the most time. And it's really an art. Each fruit, vegetable, or meat, whatever it is you're canning, each one is slightly different. And that's where that canning blue book that I showed you earlier comes in handy. But it's fun. It's a fun challenge, and it's something that I've done for so long. It's just a part of my life. Comes canning season, people don't see me for a few days, but we love to eat it in the winter. It saves money. We don't buy the processed or canned foods in the grocery store. It's just, once you start, it's hard to stop. So I just wanted to tell you that, give you some extra little tips. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.